"Stop this funeral. She's not dead." The words echoed across the billionaire's mansion hall. Gasps filled the air. Guards rushed forward. Cameras clicked. The mourners turned, stunned, as a homeless man in torn clothes pointed at the coffin. And then, just as the guards grabbed him, a faint sigh rose from the coffin. The dead had just breathed. But how did a homeless man end up stopping the funeral of Amelia Carter, the only daughter of one of South Africa's richest men? And why was she about to be buried alive? Let's rewind. The sky above Johannesburg was grey, heavy with the weight of sorrow and secrets. Black cars lined the Carter mansion driveway like a fleet of crows. Inside the grand hall, the rich and powerful had gathered to mourn Amelia Carter, the only daughter of billionaire Richard Carter. Amelia was only 28, a woman known for her beauty and kindness, her smile lighting up charity galas and her name whispered in fashion circles. Now she lay motionless in a white coffin, her delicate hands crossed over her chest, pearls around her neck. The mourners whispered behind lace veils. Some shed genuine tears. Others counted the inheritance in their heads. Cameras clicked as reporters circled outside the gates. Richard Carter, tall and stern, stood at the front. His eyes were red, though whether from grief or fury no one could tell. He had enemies in business and within his own blood. For many, Amelia's death was not just tragedy, it was opportunity. But at the back of the hall, unseen by most, stood a ragged man in torn clothes. His hair was matted, his beard wild, but his eyes burned with something no one else carried, certainty. His name was David. Once a promising young doctor, life had crushed him, and he now wandered the streets with nothing but memories. But today, as he stared at Amelia's still form, something inside him screamed, "She is not dead." The priest raised his hands to begin the final prayers. The coffin would soon be closed. And once it was sealed, Amelia would be gone forever. David clenched his fists. His heart pounded against his ribs. If he was wrong, he would be mocked, beaten, maybe even killed. But if he was right? The silence was broken when he suddenly shouted, his voice echoing across the hall. "Stop this funeral. She's not dead." The room went still, as though time itself had stopped. Every head turned toward the ragged figure standing at the back. His voice still echoed in the high marble ceiling, "She's not dead." Gasps and whispers filled the hall. Some clutched their pearls, others laughed nervously. Billionaire Richard Carter's face turned to stone. "Who let this madman in here?" One of the guards barked, already moving toward David. But David did not flinch. He stepped forward, his torn shoes scraping against the polished floor. His eyes never left the coffin. "I said stop. Don't bury her. She's breathing." The priest frowned. "My son, grief has clearly clouded your mind. She's breathing." David roared again, his voice trembling with raw conviction. He pointed at Amelia. "Look at her chest. It rises. It falls. You just don't see it because you don't want to believe it." The crowd erupted. Some shouted for security. Others craned their necks toward the coffin, doubt flickering in their eyes. Richard Carter's jaw tightened. "Get him out of here. Now." Two guards rushed forward, grabbing David by the arms. He struggled, his voice wild and desperate. "I was a doctor. I know death when I see it. And she is not dead." That one sentence stopped everyone. Whispers rippled like a storm through the mourners. A doctor? What if he's right? Could Amelia really? The guards hesitated just enough for doubt to sink into the room. Even Richard's cold mask faltered, his eyes darting to the coffin. David saw his chance. "Check her pulse," he begged, his voice breaking. "One touch, just one, and you'll know I'm telling the truth." The tension in the hall was unbearable. The priest glanced at Richard, his hands shaking. "Perhaps, for peace of mind, we should check." The billionaire's face darkened. "This is madness." But his voice lacked the iron it once carried. Everyone's eyes were on Amelia now. The woman in the coffin, pale and still, yet suddenly more alive than ever. And then, just as the guards released David, the faintest sound echoed in the room. A sigh. From the coffin. The sigh was so faint, many thought they imagined it. But David's eyes widened with triumph. "You heard that. She's alive. Chaos broke out in the hall. Some screamed. Others stumbled back from the coffin as though Amelia had risen from the grave. Cameras flashed like lightning, reporters pushing forward. Richard Carter froze. His lips parted, his body trembling for the first time in years. His daughter, his only daughter, was alive. Or was this some cruel trick? The priest staggered to the coffin, his fingers shaking as he reached down. His hand hovered, then pressed gently against Amelia's wrist. His eyes bulged. "Dear God," he whispered. There is a pulse." Gasps shook the room like thunder. The Carter family members who had gathered to inherit millions went pale. Amelia's cousins whispered furiously, "This can't be happening." She was declared dead. But David pushed forward, breaking free from the guards. He leaned over Amelia, his ragged breath mixing with hers. His voice softened, trembling with both desperation and hope. "Amelia, can you hear me?" And then her lips moved. Barely. But enough. Everyone saw it. She's trying to speak," shouted someone from the crowd. The hall erupted again, but David wasn't finished. He turned, his eyes blazing at the mourners. She wasn't dead. She was poisoned. Someone wanted her buried alive. The words dropped like bombs. Silence. Then pandemonium. "Poison," a voice cried. "That's impossible. Who would do such a thing?" But Richard Carter's face drained of color. His mind raced back to the days before Amelia's sudden collapse. The rushed diagnosis. The private doctor who swore it was cardiac arrest. The strange insistence on a quick burial. David's voice cut through the noise. She was paralyzed. A rare poison mimics death. Only her breath, her pulse, faint as whispers, kept her alive. And someone here knew it. All eyes darted around the hall. Suspicions ignited. The billionaire's relatives shifted nervously, beads of sweat forming. Then, Amelia's eyelids fluttered. Slowly, painfully. She opened her eyes. And the first thing she whispered was not her father's name. It was, "Don't trust them." The words from Amelia's trembling lips, "Don't trust them," hung in the air like a curse. The mourners froze, fear crawling across their faces. Richard Carter stumbled closer to the coffin. "Don't trust who, my child?" "Who?" His voice cracked, the mighty billionaire suddenly a desperate father. Amelia's lips quivered. Her voice was weak, broken. "The one standing closest to you." The crowd gasped. All eyes shifted to Richard's immediate family, the brother who managed his businesses, the sister-in-law dressed in diamonds, and the nephew who was already rumored to inherit. Their faces turned pale, then cold. David's voice sliced through the murmurs. "She knows who tried to kill her." The hall erupted in accusations. "This is madness," shouted Richard's brother, slamming his fist on a pew. "She's delirious. The girl nearly died, of course she's confused." Or, David countered, his eyes burning, "She knows exactly what she's saying." Richard's nephew, Daniel, stepped forward with a smirk too sharp for a funeral. "Are we really listening to a homeless man in rags and a half-conscious woman? This is embarrassing. Uncle, you should end this charade before the press destroys us." But before Richard could answer, Amelia's hand twitched. With all the strength she could gather, she pointed a trembling finger straight at Daniel. The room fell silent. Her whisper was barely audible, but everyone heard it. It was him. Gasps. Shouts. Half the mourners jumped to their feet. Richard staggered backward as though struck by lightning. His nephew, his blood, had tried to bury his daughter alive. Daniel laughed, but the laughter was hollow, brittle. "This is absurd. Lies from a dying girl and a mad beggar." But Amelia's eyes filled with tears. "I heard him. That night. He was on the phone. He said, 'She'll never wake up. Make sure the doctor signs the papers.'" Richard's knees buckled. His guards surged forward, seizing Daniel by the arms. The young man thrashed, his face twisted with rage. "You old fool. She was going to take everything. You gave her the company, the fortune, the future, and me. Nothing." The truth exploded across the room. Gasps turned to screams. But just as the guards dragged Daniel toward the exit, a chilling laugh echoed. It wasn't Daniel. It came from the shadows at the back. And a voice said, he wasn't the only one. The chilling laughter rolled through the grand hall like smoke, making the chandeliers tremble. Every mourner froze. Heads turned toward the back, where shadows stretched across the velvet curtains. Out of the darkness stepped a tall, elegant woman in a black gown. Her eyes glistened like shards of glass, her smile sharp and cruel. It was Margaret Carter, Richard's own sister. The billionaire staggered as though he'd been stabbed. Margaret. No, tell me this isn't true. Her laughter deepened. Oh, Richard, you've always been blind. Too busy building empires to notice the snakes coiled at your feet. Your precious Amelia was never supposed to die. But when Daniel came to me with his plans, I saw opportunity. Gasps shook the hall. Some covered their mouths, others backed away. Margaret walked slowly, her heels striking the marble with thunderous echoes. You gave everything to that girl, she sneered. The estate. The board. The Carter legacy. And what of me? The sister who kept your secrets, who cleaned up your messes? You cast me aside, Richard. So I decided to take what should have been mine. Richard's face twisted with rage and pain. You tried to kill my daughter, your own flesh and blood. Margaret's eyes burned. Blood means nothing when power is on the table. David stepped forward, fists clenched. So you poisoned her. You forced the doctor to declare her dead. Margaret smirked. Not forced. Bought. Money can make any man lie. The room erupted in screams and curses. Mourners pushed against the walls, desperate to escape the storm building in the Carter mansion. But Margaret raised her hand, and suddenly 3 armed men appeared from the side doors, guns glinting under the chandelier light. The hall went deadly silent. None of you are leaving, Margaret hissed. Not until I finish what I started. David's heart pounded. Richard's guards reached for their weapons, but Margaret's men aimed first. The billionaire stood frozen, his daughter still half-conscious in the coffin. Amelia's lips trembled again. Her whisper pierced the silence. Dad, don't trust anyone. And then the mansion lights went out. Darkness swallowed everything. The lights snapped off, plunging the grand hall into total darkness. Gasps and screams tore through the crowd as people stumbled blindly, their voices echoing against the high walls. Gunshots cracked. The chandeliers shook. A woman screamed. Someone fell. The air smelled of smoke and panic. In the chaos, David dropped to the ground, crawling toward the coffin by instinct. His hands brushed cold marble, then the smooth edge of Amelia's casket. Stay with me, he whispered urgently. Her weak voice shivered through the dark. David, don't let them bury the truth. Suddenly, emergency lights flickered on, flooding the hall with a red glow that painted every face in blood. The scene was chaos, guests huddled against walls, guards bleeding, Margaret's men gripping their guns like wolves circling prey. Margaret stood tall, untouched, her diamond necklace gleaming under the crimson lights. Daniel, still restrained by Richard's guards, screamed at her, You promised me everything. You said I'd inherit once she was gone. Margaret turned her icy gaze on him. And you believed me. Fool. You were only bait. The room erupted in shocked gasps again. Daniel thrashed, spitting with fury. You used me. But Margaret wasn't done. She raised her voice, every word sharp as glass. You all think Amelia is your sweet little angel, your innocent heir. But ask yourselves, why did she collapse so suddenly? Why did she never fight? Perhaps because Amelia carries secrets of her own. All eyes shot to the coffin. Amelia's eyelids flickered, her tears glistening. Richard leaned forward, shaking his head. Don't listen to her, my child. Don't. Margaret's laugh cut him off. Oh, Richard. Shall I tell them? Or shall she? The crowd held its breath. Even the gunman paused. And then Amelia's lips parted. Her voice was soft, but clear. It's true. I kept a secret. A terrible one. And if you all knew, you'd never look at me the same again. The hall shook with whispers. Faces twisted with confusion and fear. Richard's heart thundered. David's chest froze. Margaret leaned closer to the coffin, her smile poisonous. Tell them, niece. Tell them what you've been hiding all along. Amelia's trembling hand gripped David's sleeve. Her whisper cut through the silence. David, tell them. You know the truth. The red emergency lights flickered against the coffin as the hall waited in breathless silence. All eyes were on David, the ragged man who had just saved Amelia's life. His chest heaved, his fists clenched. Richard's booming voice cracked through the air. What secret? David, speak. David swallowed hard, his gaze shifting between Amelia's tearful eyes and the furious face of Margaret. His voice trembled, yet it carried enough weight to silence even the gunman. She's right, David said finally. I know the truth. Because I was there when it began. Gasps swept the hall. Richard staggered. You? How could you possibly? David's eyes burned with shame. Because I was once your family's doctor. Years ago. Before I lost everything. Whispers erupted. A billionaire's doctor turned homeless beggar? Impossible. But the pain etched into David's face was undeniable. He continued, his voice cutting like glass. Amelia didn't just collapse from poison. She's been living under a curse of silence. A secret that could destroy the Carter Empire if it ever came out. Margaret smirked, leaning back as if savoring every word. Go on, tell them. Tell them who she really is. Amelia's hand trembled in David's grasp. Tears spilled from her eyes. Please, not like this. But it was too late. David's voice rose, each word shaking the hall. Amelia is not Richard Carter's daughter. The hall exploded with screams. People clutched at their chests, jaws dropped, others shouted it was a lie. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashing. Richard went pale, his knees buckling. What are you saying? David's voice broke. She's my daughter. Mine. Years ago, when I worked as your family doctor, I made the mistake of falling in love with your late wife. Amelia was the child of that affair. But when you discovered, you destroyed me. You cast me out, ruined my career, left me on the streets. Richard's hands trembled. The room tilted, his empire crumbling in his mind. Amelia sobbed, her voice shaking. Father. I mean. Richard. I didn't want you to find out like this. I only kept silent because I loved you both. But Margaret knew. She used it against me. Margaret's laughter slashed through the chaos. And there it is. The perfect scandal. The Carter heir isn't even a Carter. Your empire, Richard, it's a lie built on another man's blood. The hall trembled with shock. Guards didn't move. Guests didn't breathe. And Richard Carter, the billionaire who had ruled Johannesburg like a king, fell to his knees before the coffin of the daughter he no longer knew was his. The red glow of the emergency lights bathed the room in hellish color. Silence cracked under the weight of David's revelation. The crowd buzzed like hornets, torn between pity, disgust, and disbelief. Richard Carter's voice shook, but it carried the pain of a wounded king. All these years, I raised you as my own. Loved you, protected you, gave you everything. His eyes glistened as they met Amelia's. And you knew? Tears streamed down Amelia's face. I tried to tell you. But how could I? You would have hated me. You would have hated her memory. And I loved you too much to lose you. Richard's chest heaved. His fists tightened, then dropped helplessly to his sides. Margaret, his voice turned cold as steel. You knew this secret, didn't you? Margaret stepped forward, her smile venomous. Of course I knew. It was the sweetest dagger I've ever held. I watched you worship her, thinking she was yours, while all along she carried another man's blood. Richard's roar shook the hall. You snake. He lunged, but Margaret's armed men raised their weapons instantly. Gasps echoed. Guards froze, caught between protecting Richard and saving their own lives. Daniel, still pinned by Richard's guards, sneered. So that's it. All this fighting for a bastard child who isn't even one of us. Let her die. Amelia flinched, her weak body shivering in the coffin. David leaned closer, shielding her. His eyes burned with fury. Don't you dare call her that. She is my daughter and she's worth more than all your riches combined. Margaret's eyes glittered. Touching. But here's the real twist, brother. She leaned in, her voice a hiss. Do you even know what happened to your wife the night she died? Or shall I tell them the truth about that, too? Richard froze, his chest heaving. The mourners whispered, restless, afraid. Margaret raised her voice, cutting through the noise. Your beloved wife didn't die in that car accident. She was murdered. And the man standing right here, David, was part of it. The hall exploded in chaos. Guests screamed. Some cursed. Others gasped in disbelief. Richard's eyes flared, locking onto David like burning coals. Is it true? Richard thundered. David's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. And in that silence, Amelia whispered, her voice trembling but sharp enough to cut glass. Don't blame him, blame me. The hall fell into stunned silence. All eyes turned to the coffin, where Amelia's pale lips moved, her whisper slicing through the chaos like a blade. Don't blame him, blame me. Richard staggered forward, his hands trembling. What are you saying, my child? Amelia's eyes, though heavy with exhaustion, burned with guilt. Mother's death, it wasn't an accident. And it wasn't David's fault. It was mine. Gasps erupted like thunder. People clutched each other, unable to believe what they were hearing. Margaret's smirk faltered, curiosity flickering across her cold eyes. David shook his head violently, his voice breaking. Amelia, no. Don't say this. Don't. But she pressed on, her voice trembling yet unrelenting. That night, I heard them arguing. Father was shouting. Mother was crying. I ran into the garage, trying to stop them. But when I grabbed the car keys to keep her from leaving, I didn't know. I didn't know the brakes had been tampered with. I gave her the keys, thinking I was saving her. And she drove straight into death. The hall erupted with horrified cries. Reporters shouted. Guests covered their mouths. Richard's face turned white as ash. His knees buckled, but he steadied himself against the coffin. No, it can't be. Your mother's car, the police said. They lied, Amelia whispered. Margaret paid them. She made sure the truth was buried. She knew I'd blame myself forever. And she was right. Margaret's lips curled into a wicked smile. Finally, the golden child speaks. You carried that guilt all these years, and I sharpened it like a knife. I poisoned you with your own secret, Amelia. David's fists shook. You monster. Margaret snapped her fingers. The gunmen raised their weapons again. Careful, doctor. Your second chance at fatherhood can end in a single shot. But then, Amelia's weak hand gripped David's sleeve. Her whisper was sharp, urgent. There's more, she's lying. My mother's death wasn't only her plan. It went deeper. Much deeper. The hall froze. David leaned closer. Deeper how? Amelia's lips trembled. Her final words before her strength gave way were, Mother's killer is still here. Her head dropped back. The hall screamed. Richard roared. And for the first time, Margaret's smile vanished. The hall trembled with panic. Amelia's words, Mother's killer is still here, hung like a ghost over every soul in the room. Eyes darted. Hearts pounded. Margaret's smirk had vanished, her painted face stiff with fear. She's delirious, she hissed. Don't listen to her. But Richard's booming voice silenced all. Enough lies. No one leaves this hall until the truth is dragged into the light. Guards barred the doors. Cameras flashed. The mourners held their breath, waiting for the final dagger. David knelt by Amelia, pressing his ear close. Her whisper was faint, but it struck him like thunder. It wasn't Margaret, it was him. David's head shot up, his eyes locking on Richard Carter himself. The hall gasped. No, Richard staggered backward, clutching his chest. No, it's not true. Amelia's weak voice rose. It was you, Richard. You killed her. The silence was crushing. Then Richard's face twisted, torn between rage and despair. I didn't mean to. I only wanted to stop her. She threatened to expose everything, our deals, the bribes, the corruption that built this empire. She said she'd leave me, take you with her. I couldn't let that happen. So yes, I tampered with the car. I never thought she would actually die. Screams filled the hall. Mourners collapsed into chairs. Cameras clicked furiously, capturing the billionaire's downfall in real time. Richard's knees buckled as guards swarmed him. I did it for the family, for the Carter name. His voice cracked, desperate. Everything I built, Amelia, forgive me. But Amelia's tears flowed as she turned her face away. You buried me alive once. Now the world will bury your empire. Margaret's laugh rang hollow now, drowned by the chaos. Daniel cursed like a madman. But David stood, pulling Amelia's trembling body into his arms. His ragged clothes couldn't hide the fire in his eyes. For years you cast me aside, David said, his voice steady. But in the end, it wasn't your money that saved her. It was me, the man you left on the streets. The guards dragged Richard away, his shouts echoing. The empire had fallen. The mourners had seen the truth. And as Amelia leaned against David's chest, her faint whisper carried more power than all the riches in the room. Sometimes, the poorest man holds the richest heart. And that was just one story, but trust me, there are even deeper, darker, and more powerful tales waiting for you. If this one shocked you, the next will leave you speechless. Hit subscribe now, turn on the bell, and don't miss the next story because it will be even more unbelievable than this one.